So today we will sketch the graph of a function using the information that we have gathered from the first and the second derivatives together with some points. So in graphing a function, ito yung mga kailangan natin. First, we need to know the domain and the intercepts of the function. We need to find the first and the second derivative and the possible extrema and possible point of inflections. After which, gagawa tayo ng table of signs both for the first and the second derivative to know kung concave up ba or concave down. Siyempre to, we will use the sign of the second derivative. And then, kukunin na natin yung coordinates ng mga relative extrema natin and POIs. And then, we will plot and label the important points. For example, yung mga intercepts, yung mga extrema, mga POI. And then, use the table to graph the rest of the function. For our first example, let's sketch the graph of f of x equals x cubed over 9 minus 3x. So first, determine muna natin ano yung domain. Since this is just a polynomial, then the domain of this is just R, or the set of real numbers. Next is, we will find the x-intercept. And the x-intercepts are 0, 3 square root of 3, and negative 3 square root of 3. So paano natin yun hinanap? By setting f of x to be equal to 0. So, magiging 0 equals x cubed over 9 minus 3x. Or that is 0 equals, nag-multiply tayo ng 9 sa lahat. Then we have x cubed minus 27x. Or that is now x times x squared minus 27 equals 0. So, ito, dito galing yung 0. And then, ito naman, kapag ginamit natin yung quadratic formula, lalabas dito na ang sagot is 3 square root of 3, tsaka negative 3 square root of 3. Next is the y-intercept. And the y-intercept of this is at 0. Ito naman, nakuha natin by letting x to be equal to 0. So, ito naman, f of x is equal to 0 cubed over 9 minus 3 times 0. So, f of x or y is equal to 0. And then next is, we need to find the first derivative. So, our first derivative is f prime of x equals, so we have 1 over 9 times 3x squared, power rule lang yan, minus 3. So, that is now x squared over 3 minus 3, or that is x squared minus 9 over 3. And then from there, kukunin natin yung kanyang critical numbers. What are the possible critical numbers? We have 3 and negative 3. Paano naman nakuha yun? By setting the first derivative to be equal to 0. So we have x squared minus 9 over 3 is equal to 0, or that is x squared minus 9 is equal to 0. So we have x now equals plus or minus 3. And then next, we need to find the second derivative. So we have f prime f. So we have f double prime of x equals, okay, from here we have 1/3 times 2x minus 0. So that is now 2x over 3. And our possible point of inflection is equal to 0. Why? Kasi isi-set lang natin to, second derivative into 0. So we have 2x equals 0 or x equals 0. So, yun yung ating possible point of inflection. Now, using that information, gagawa tayo ngayon ng table. Okay, like this. So, note that meron tayong mga endpoints dito, the critical numbers and the POIs. So, yan yung magiging endpoints ng intervals natin. So, first is, we have from negative infinity to negative 3. Tapos, may critical number tayo na negative 3 dito. Then, next is from negative 3 to 0. Okay? Then, may critical number tayo na 0 dito. Then, from 0 to positive 3. And then, may critical number na positive 3. And then, from 3 to positive infinity. So, unang munang gagawin natin, check muna natin ano yung values ng mga critical numbers natin at f. So, ang gagawin lang natin, itong mga critical numbers natin, isa-substitute natin doon sa ating f. Okay? So, first, f of negative 3 is equal to negative 3 cubed over 9 minus 3x, or negative 3, okay? So, that is equal to negative 27 over 9 plus 9, so that is 6. Next naman, f of 0 equals, okay, so 0 lang yan. 0 cube over 9 minus 3 times 0, so that is just equal to 0. And finally, f of 3 is equal to 3 cube over 9 minus 3 times 3, so that is 27 over 9, that is 3 minus 9 is negative 6. So we have negative 6. Ngayon naman, i-check natin yung mga intervals natin at f prime and f double prime. Tignan natin yung kanyang sign. So dito, kuha tayo ng number, let's say negative 4. Dito naman is negative 1. Dito naman is, let's say, 1 at dito ay 4. Okay? And then, isa-substitute natin yon sa first derivative at second derivative natin para ma-check natin ano yung kanyang sign. So, ito yung first at second derivatives natin. So, negative 4 substituted to the first derivative, we have a positive sign. Positive yung makukuha natin dyan. At pag yung negative 4, nilagay naman natin sa second derivative, that is 2 times negative 4 over 3, so that's negative. Next is negative 1 sa f prime, so we have 1 over 3 minus 3, so that is negative. Okay? At yung f double prime naman natin dito is negative din. Next is for 1, we have f prime of 1 is negative yung sign, and f double prime of 1 is positive yung sign. And finally, f prime of 4 is positive, and f double prime of 4 is also positive. Now, based on the signs of the first and second derivative, ano ang ating conclusion? So, for the first derivative here, we have increasing siya and concave down. Ito naman, decreasing siya and also concave down. For here, we have a decreasing function pero concave up. And here naman, we have an increasing function kasi plus yung first derivative. Tapos concave up kasi plus yung second derivative. Now, checking the first derivative, meron tayong change from positive to negative dito, which means that at negative 3, 6, we have a relative maximum. Eto, wala namang nag-change, so wala. Dito, from negative to positive, which means that at 3, negative 6, we have a relative minimum. Dito naman sa kabila, negative to negative, no change. Negative to positive, means that 0, 0 is actually a POI, a point of inflection. And then positive to positive, no change. Given that information, together with our points, we have 0, 0 as the intercept and POI, 3 square root of 3, 0 as an intercept, negative 3 square root of 3, 0 as an intercept again, our negative 3, 6 as the relative maximum, and 3, negative 6 as the relative minimum, we can now graph the function. So, unahin na natin yung ating mga points and intercepts. So, we have 0, 0. 3 square root of 3 is around 5.19. So, dito siya. Then, we have the relative max to be negative 3, 6, somewhere here. Kulang yung ating graph. At yung ating relative minimum na 3, negative 6. Okay? So, sabi niya, from negative infinity to negative 3, meron tayong increasing function. Itatamaan niya yan. And then, concave down siya. From negative 3 naman to 0, we have a decreasing function. Okay? Na concave down. Yan. And then, 0 is a point of inflection. So, mag-change ng concavity dito. So, from 0 to 3 naman, we have a decreasing function and then concave up. And then, at 3 to positive infinity, we have an increasing function na concave up. So, ganyan yung itsura ng ating graph. Or, para mas clear, ito yung kanyang itsura. Second example, let's graph f of x equals x raised to 4 plus 2x cubed. So first, let's determine the domain. We know that this is a polynomial, so the domain of this is just R. The x-intercepts are 0 and negative 2. So paano yan nakuha naman? So we have x raised to 4 plus 2x cubed equals 0. So we have x cubed times x plus 2 equals 0. So dito nanggaling yung 0 at dito nanggaling yung negative 2. Our y-intercept is 0. Okay, yan naman by letting f of x equals 0 raised to 4 plus 2 times 0 cubed. So y is equal to 0. Next is we determine the first derivative. So the first derivative now is equal to 4x cubed plus 6x squared, or that is just equal to 2x squared times 2x plus 3, which if we now equate this to 0, makukuha natin yung ating critical numbers na 0 at negative 3 halves. And then next, we will find the second derivative. So we have first derivative is equal to 4x cubed plus 6x squared. Para mas madali. So second derivative now is equal to 12x squared plus 12x. So that is 12x times x plus 1. Which now gives us a possible POI to be equal to 0 and negative 1. With that information, meron tayong gumawa ng table of values. So again, meron tayong mga endpoints dito. So negative infinity to negative 3 over 2. Then we have the critical number negative 3 over 2. From negative 3 over 2 naman to negative 1, critical number na negative 1. Then from negative 1 to 0, critical number na 0. And then from 0 to positive infinity. Now, kunin natin yung values ng ating f by substituting yung mga critical numbers natin dun sa f. For negative 3 over 2, f of negative 3 over 2 is equal to negative 3 over 2 raised to 4 plus 2 times negative 3 over 2 cube, or that is equal to negative 27 over 16. F of negative 1 is equal to negative 1 raised to 4 plus 2 times negative 1 cubed. That is just equal to negative 1. And finally, f of 0. So alam na natin, 0 raised to 4 plus 2 times 0 cubed is just 0. Ngayon naman, check natin yung signs ng ating f prime and f double prime doon sa ating mga intervals. So dito, kuha tayo ng number, let's say negative 2. Dito naman is negative 1.25. Dito is negative 0.5. And then dito is 1. And then check natin yung sign ng f prime and f double prime. So eto yung mga yon. Dito tayo mag-substitute. For negative 2, f prime of 2 is negative. While f double prime of 2 is positive. This means that decreasing siya pero concave up. Dito naman, f prime of negative 1.25, positive siya. F double prime of negative 1.25 is positive. So, siya ay increasing at concave up. For negative 1, 0, we have negative 0.5. F prime of negative 0.5 is positive. F double prime of negative 0.5 is negative. This means that increasing siya pero concave down. And finally, 0 to positive infinity, we have 1. F prime of 1 is positive. F double prime of 1 is also positive. This means that increasing siya at concave up. Now, check naman natin yung ating mga points. So, merong change from negative to positive. This means that ito ay ating relative minimum. Okay? Ito, wala na siyang change, wala na ring change. In this case naman, from positive to positive, no change. From positive to negative, might change. Therefore, POI siya. Ito, from negative to positive means POI din siya. With that information now, we have 0, 0 to be an intercept and POI, negative 2, 0 to be an intercept, negative 1 to be a POI, and negative 3 halves, negative 27 over 16 as a relative minimum. So, unahin muna natin yung mga points, 0, 0, negative 2, 0, okay? We have negative 1, 1. We have negative 1, negative 1. Then we have negative 3 halves, okay, somewhere here. Then negative 27 over 16. That is equal to negative 1.6875. Somewhere here. Okay. Then we can now graph from negative infinity to negative 3 halves. We have decreasing function and concave up. Okay. And then, increasing function siya, then concave up. Yan. And then, increasing function siya, pero concave down. And then, increasing function na siya, and then concave up. Yun. So, for a clearer graph, ito yung kanyang itsura. Yan. And for the final example, hindi given yung f of x, pero given yung mga information like local minimum, local maximum, and the graph of f prime and f double prime. We will sketch the graph given only this information. We know that sa first derivative, makikita na natin dyan kung increasing o decreasing yung function. For the second derivative naman, makikita natin kung ano yung concavity ng function natin. So, those will help us para i-graph yung ating function. So for our solution, una muna, check natin yung ating first derivative. So meron tayong critical points na 1 and 3. Remember that yung critical point natin, f prime of x, okay, or the derivative is equal to 0 para masabi mo na critical point siya. So we have 1 and 3. Now let's observe, ano ba yung sign ng first derivative natin from 0 to 1? From 0 to 1 lang kasi yung domain natin from 0 to 4. Check ninyo na nasa taas siya. So, positive yung kanyang values. Therefore, positive to. From 1 to 3 naman, nasaan naman yung graph ng f prime natin? Nasa baba, which means that negative yung kanyang values. And finally, from 3 to 4, nasa taas ulit siya, so positive. What does this tell us? Sinasabi niya na, at 0 to 1, f of x is actually increasing. From 1 to 3, f of x is decreasing, and from 3 to 4, f of x is increasing. This also means that meron tayong local maximum at x equals 1 kasi nga nag-change from positive to negative, and its value is 2 over pi. And the local minimum at x equals 3 kasi meron ding change na nangyari with a value of negative 2 over pi. Etong mga to is given kanina doon sa problem. Okay? Pero now, we know that nasa x equals 1 siya at x equals 3. For the second derivative naman, so we have the critical point to be 2. Siyempre, hindi kasama yung 0 tsaka 4 kasi endpoints yan. And observe that from 0 to 2, nasa baba siya. So, means negative to. At 2 to 4 is positive siya. This means that from 0 to 2, f of x is concave down. And from 2 to 4, f of x is concave up. And we have a point of inflection at x equals 2 kasi may change from negative to positive. With that information, okay, sinamarize ko na siya dito sa table na to, we can now graph the function. So first, we have the points 1, 2 over pi, that is 0.63, so somewhere here. And then we have 2, 0, and then we have 3, negative 2 over pi, somewhere here. So sabi niya, from 0 to 1, we have increasing function and concave down. Parang ganyan. Yan. From 1 to 2, decreasing function pero concave down. From 2 to 3, we have decreasing function pero concave up. And then, from 3 to 4, we have increasing function pero concave up. Yan. Or, para sa clearer na graph, this is actually yung kanyang itsura.